I just wanted to cover a couple of things about purchasing the new bull and what happens once you get him home. I'm going to break this down into a couple of areas. One is actually choosing the bull, presuming you've already done all of your searches and all the rest of it, but also, what to look for when you're at the sale or when you walk onto a property to purchase a bull. The next step then is the delivery. So, actually managing that process correctly. What do you do when he actually arrives home? The mating of putting a new bull out compared to an old bull and how you should manage them slightly differently and what you need to look for. And then what to look for when you're actually in the mating process. So you're just about to join or you've already joined. What to actually do during that mating. So let's start a little bit on the purchase. So when you go along to a sale or you're arriving on property to have a look at a bull, I presume that you've already done all your EBV research and you've had a look at the genetics and you're comfortable that the bull you're going to have a look at is actually going to meet your breeding standards. So I'm not going to touch too much on that. But what I would like to touch on is having a look at temperament. So you can just imagine, we've got a couple of young bulls in the background here that will be going to a sale in August. So I spend a fair bit of one-on-one time in the yards with them so that they get used to that one-on-one activity, even though I've got two in the background, if you can see the other one. My bulls are very comfortable within my presence and within anyone else's presence. On sale day, in my environment, they're actually going to be put into a bull ring and there's going to be an auctioneer shouting at them, there's going to be a crowd, and there's going to be a fairly high octane type environment that they need to then contend with, which they're absolutely not used to. So you want to be looking for that, but I wouldn't judge a bull necessarily on how he performs in the show ring as much as I would when you're actually going around to inspect. So if you're able to sort of get into the pen with the bull or you're standing beside the bull and there's absolutely no concern from him towards you, well, that's a good sign. If you're having a look at him in the paddock, you're not really going to want to choose the bull that's sort of heading around the back of the mob or trying to push into the middle so he can't be seen, because they're the more likely to have temperament issues. So just sort of be a little bit careful, when you do choose, and get very comfortable with the temperament. You're going to live with this bull for another 2 or 3 years, and the last thing you need is every time you get him in the yard or you walk into a paddock that you're concerned about it. I also believe that bulls pick up on the way that you're feeling, a little bit like a horse does. So if you're fairly hyper or you're treating them in a fairly aggressive manner, they're more likely to sort of have that fight and flight type reaction to it. So I always treat the bulls gently and they do the same for me. I never have any concerns. If I do notice a bull early on that has a temperament issue, well, I'm actually dealing with that. If I can have one-on-one time and he settles, that's great. If he doesn't, he gets sold, and he gets sold to the meatworks. Then, we've actually agreed to purchase, and now we're thinking about the delivery. Often I will be asked whether I know of anybody who can actually pick a bull up and deliver it, or on sale day, we've got a series of different carriers available that we've chosen and we trust. So what to look for with that is we want the carrier to also be gentle. We want them to have good equipment, but we also need to brief them exactly which animals will be dropped off and exactly where. And also, if they're not from the same management mob, you want to make sure that there's the ability to actually break up the bull on the truck even, so have them in different compartments. The last thing you need is for a bull to be damaged. In the truck, we don't want the bulls to be sliding all over the place, so just make sure there's adequate flooring, sawdust or sand or some sort of grid that will prevent the bull from sliding around the place. On longer journeys, are we going to make sure that they have a brake or don't have a brake? The interstate carriers are pretty well equipped for this sort of thing, but it's something that you actually do need to think about. On arrival, this is where a lot of issues can actually arise. So you need to think about, if you've got bulls from the same management group, well, terrific, they can go into your yards. I would absolutely recommend that whether you've got 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 different size, that you be aware that if you're buying from different mobs, they're going to have a bit of a tussle and they're going to try to get the pecking order sorted out. So you need to be aware of it, and what the last thing you need is for them to be damaged in the yards. If you're bringing a single young bull home, do not put him out into the paddock. Do not jump him off the truck and let him go for it, particularly if there's another bull around the place. If you're jumping them off the truck and letting them go, and the natural instinct is to head home and the fencings aren't that good, well, that's exactly what he's going to try to do. If there's an older bull and you put a young bull in, he's going to get some treatment, and they're going to sort out the pecking order pretty quickly. So not a great idea. The ideal scenario when you're bringing a young bull back to your property is to have a couple of old cows or a couple of cows that are either pregnant or you're not concerned about being pregnant, that they can integrate with. Put them in the yards overnight with some hay and some water and adequate bedding or whatever your scenario is, so that they actually have a pleasant experience, and they're not really sort of getting a little bit concerned or hyper about different things. So make it as easy as you possibly can. You've just invested several $1000s, so you really want to think about looking after these animals. The next morning you want to check on them, and that's probably when you want to think about if they haven't already been vaccinated, albeit we sell ours with a vet check, all the vaccinations up to date and everything else. But if you aren't absolutely sure, then you want to be thinking about all of that. So a 7-in-1 or a 5-in-1 in lepto, you want to do a vibriosis, you want to do a 3-day sickness, and any, if you're into tick country, have they been treated for tick or not? So make sure you get your vaccinations up to date. Give them a backline worm or a worming injection, so that you're absolutely guaranteed that bull's in the best possible health. Depending on when they're going to go out to work, you want to also think about the type of nutrition they've come from and the type of nutrition they're going to go to on your property. And you want to start to get them used to the new environment. So if they've come purely off grain, and then they come to your place, they're going to melt like butter if you're not also supplementing their feed. You absolutely need to think about the mineral intake and making sure that they're kept healthy in that way, but also the amount of nutrition. We don't finish our bulls on grain. We use a Riverina pellet, and we use hay, and they got access to the normal pasture. So what we're trying to achieve with our bulls is that they're on a rising weight gain and they're ready to work. They're not rolling fat, so that when you get them home, they're going to melt in the paddock. And they're also not going to have hock and feed issues because of the extra weight that they're carrying, particularly when you send them out to service the cows. You don't want a bull breaking down, and it's no different to us. If we're sort of over fat and we're not exercised and we're sent out to work, we're more likely to get tired quickly, or we're going to have some sort of injury happen. So be thinking about all those things on the arrival of your bull. If you've got a multi-sire joining process, I would be socialising the bulls that you're going to be sending in together for a couple of weeks. You want them to have all their pecking order sorted out and be ready to go. If it's a single sire joining, so you're sending one sire out into a mob of cattle, I'd be rotating them as well, just to make sure if that bull is broken down or the fertility's not there, and you can't guarantee that, that at least there's a backup, remembering that the cycle's every 21 days. So you might leave them in, for a week after the cycle, and then rotate another bull through. I recommend between 20 and 40 being the maximum amount of cows that they're being asked to service as a young bull, or up to 2 years old, just so that you've got a fairly condensed calf drop. When it comes to old bulls as well, if I can just touch on that, the last thing that you want to do is to actually just hide the old bull in the paddock and having him looking after himself and not paying much attention to him, and then just sending him out to work. I would be looking for that rising weight gain, make sure that he's very healthy, get a vet check done on property for him, get his semen tested, get all his vaccinations up to date, make sure his feet are healthy, make sure he's healthy in every possible way, because if this joining doesn't go well, you've just blown an entire season. So bulls are very important when it comes to that, so I'd be looking after them and making sure that they're in the very best health that you can possibly get them into. When you do send them out to work, just remember that things happen in the paddock, particularly in multi-sire. I had a situation where I had two fantastic backup bulls. and they were in different mobs. But once the older bull had serviced all of his cows, he jumped the fence and wanted to service the young cows, the young bull's cows. In the process of jumping the fence, he broke his pizzle. Then once he got in with the other mob, he then proceeded to belt up our young bull and broke his pelvis. So in one incident, effectively, I lost 2 bulls, and they were very high value, backup stud bulls. So these things happen. And the part of my problem was I was away for 2 weeks while that happened. So I sort of missed a cycle, and it really did spread the calves out. And I had to go ahead and find more bulls to put out with them, which is another point. If you've got multiple sires and you've got quite a few cows, have access to a backup. So if your bull does break down, that you're not going to blow another month looking for another bull and getting him, integrating him into your system. So have one ready to go. I always personally keep a couple of bulls back so that any of my clients, and this happens more regularly than you believe, so that I've got a bull to actually be sent out that they can use as a backup. So I'm always thinking about what my clients' needs are, and you're going to be thinking about the same thing insofar as what happens if one of these bulls break down, and do I have a spare, and where am I going to get one from if one does break down. I've already touched on the rotation of the herds, with young bulls, just to make sure that you are getting calves on the ground each year. So we've just sort of covered what to think about more, other than just the selection of the bull, what to look for temperament and structure wise when you're going and inspecting a bull, what the delivery process should be like, choosing and giving really good and tight instructions to the driver, what happens when he arrives home, what happens with his nutrition, integrating young bulls and old bulls, in the yard scenario, and you want to allow time for that to happen, so that they're not continually fighting in the yards. When they get into the paddock, and they're actually just focusing on servicing the cows, like their most important job, and they're not trying to sort out the pecking order and belting each other up. And then what to look for during mating. So, getting around and making sure that their pizzle's in good health, that their feet are in good health, that they're walking freely, that they're interested in the cows. So there are a few tips on what to do once you get your young bull home, and what to do with your old bull when you're just about to send him out for joining. Hope you found it interesting. I'll see you next time.